Welcome back to another video of Corpse Party Blood Drive. Anyway, let's play. Chapter 7, Determination.
この世の終わりです。
The sound of fire trucks and patrol cars echoed through the streets. The sky was dark, the air was stale. The many strong, cold gusts of wind bore mass amounts of dust and debris. I didn't envy the reporter her job, as she seemed mere moments from being blown off her feet. But to her credit, she persevered. Behind her, there was a black shadow of an old man.
お伝えしております。昨夜、治安当局の発表した全国怨霊災害の続報についてです。先日より各地で多発している不可解な死亡事件は依然収束の兆しが見えません。不審死や動機不明の無差別殺人、心霊目撃件数は増える一方です。そのため各県警は対応に苦慮。なかなか公式発表を出さない警察に報道陣は苛立ちを隠せません。
The old man's shadow in the background began acting strangely, jumping in place and making various other aimless motions.
警視庁はなるべく一人にならないように必ず3名以上で安全な場所で過ごすよう、また危険ですので外出も控えるようにと呼びかけています。
昨晩より全国各地で発生している巨大な黒い柱による出現被害につきまして、国土交通省は非常態勢の災害対策本部および警戒本部を設置しました。各地方整備局管内の情報に基づく交通・河川の被災状況および対策状況は次の通りです。
柱の成分は専門家の分析でも解析不明の未知の鉱物の結晶のようで、エンティティウォール、霊体物質と名付けられています。地震計などでも全く予測のつかない場所に突如生えてくるため、多数の死傷者を出し世間を混乱に陥れています。工事用カッターの刃も通らず撤去もできない状況です。防衛庁は自衛隊の調査結果などから先日まで上空に浮かんでいた黒い球体との関連を調査しています。
新しい避難場所の情報です。避難指示の出た地域にお住まいの方は以下の情報をチェックしてください。携帯サイト、ウェブサイトでも情報を発信しております。なお、ご覧の白い地域にある体育館や学校はすでに満員です。お近くの空きのある施設へ向かってください。
っていうか、前兆も速報もなくいきなり生えてくるんだ。避難も対策もねえんだよ。運が悪けりゃ死ぬだけだ。なんで警察はいつまでも公式発表しないんだよ。編集を不祥事と取られるのが嫌なのか、それとも何か隠してるのか。
Bro, this news anchor is losing it. The middle-aged announcer was yelling at the top of his lungs, and in an absolute frenzy, he kicked his studio desk to the ground. A black shadow of a woman could be seen behind him.
委員長。
篠崎さん、あゆみちゃん。
篠崎さん。
Wait, they're all alive?
生き返らせてくれてありがとう。みんな。だけど、もっといっぱい死んじゃったね。
The room grew dark, and each of the 4 figures who stood before me slowly melted into darkness, becoming indistinct silhouettes.
持田も
中島も岸沼も
たくさん死んじゃったね。あれ、私たちも生き返ってないよ。あゆみちゃん、何がしたかったの？
I screamed and looked up. It was just a dream. I was home watching TV. Was the news also just a nightmare part of it? I scrunched myself up again, putting my face to my knees.
生き返るって信じてたのに最初からダメだった。そうよ。私は全部意味のないことをしてたんだ。私どうすればいいの？生き返るって思ったから吉江の山で行って大怪我をしてお姉ちゃんまで失って帰ってきたのに。
I raised my feet from my knees, eyes red and burning. Then, as if I hadn't already had enough tragedy in my life, I heard a loud crash outside my house. It was unmistakably a car wreck, and a rather severe one at it. The car's alarm went off, but I was trying my best to ignore it. I didn't need this right now, so I simply wasn't going to bother with it.
次のニュースです。公益財団法人 PL 振興社の会長が失踪しました。
The car alarm outside is still going off, and it was getting harder and harder to ignore by the second. Yo, chill, dude. I'm here. I think.
何？一体誰が？
Whoever was ringing my doorbell was really, really persistent. The irregular sound brought me back to reality. I crept over I crept over to the peephole and silently looked through it to see who'd be visiting me at this hour. On the other side of the door stood a man I didn't recognize. He had short hair and was pressing the chime frantically, as if his life depended on it.
誰？
I was kind of creeped out.
やっぱり出ないでおこう。
I moved away from the peephole. The persistent ringing continued for a bit, but then finally, thankfully, came to an abrupt halt. I slowly crept back to the peephole and took another look. The man was still there. He was just pacing back and forth in place in front of the house that, for all he knew, had no occupants. After another short while, he approached the door again and immediately put his eye up outside the peephole.
今動いたら気配で私が覗いていることがバレちゃう。
The man moved his head away, but quickly replaced it with his finger, which he swirled around inside a tight space, as if trying to reach my eye or poke it out. Then he stepped away from the door. I could have taken this opportunity to slowly move away from the people, but I was oddly transfixed.
よかった。このまま帰ってくれれば。
Of course, the second I thought that, he came back to the door yet again. And yet again, he skipped the doorbell and went straight for the people.
何なの？なんで何も言わないの？気持ち悪いな。もう開けて文句言っちゃう。
I grabbed the doorknob, and moments away from following through with that plan, when suddenly...
あゆみ？幸子？ダメ、開けちゃ。え？そいつ死者だ。幸子。
I slowly turned to look at her.
涅槃は死んだ人の世界。死後の世界がこっちに来る。
Then there was oddly familiar sound, another car accident, again, right outside my door. This time I look outside through the people and saw a man from earlier sandwiched between a car and a wall of one of the houses across the street. He was absolutely mangled. But after only a few moments, the man's corpse disappeared, leaving nothing but a shadow in its place, on the wall and ground alike, a black stain.
何なの？世の中どうなってるの？
Not that I even really had to ask.
私が涅槃の壁を壊したから。
I wasn't just asking myself, I was asking Sachiko, whose presence still remained just behind my back. But she looked up at me with sad eyes.
今の人も死者真っ黒になって。
No, it couldn't be. I pulled my smartphone from my pocket and forced myself to remain calm enough to access the photo, but then just stopped and stared. The photo displayed on my phone, which was now the floor, no longer had just my friends from before with blacked out faces, but Machida, Nakashima, and Kishinuma as well. I pounded the floor with both hands and shuddered violently.
悔い改めよ。世界は終わりに近づいている。神は不浄なる不心得者を決してお許しにはならぬ。
Some cultist group was speaking on TV. I guess the news must have ended at some point when I wasn't paying attention.
世界の終わり。
This time I was just plain talking to myself. Hey, she's alive?
そう、 終わりよ。まさかヤゴウラの最後の生き残りが自爆覚悟でこんなこと考えてるなんてね。
Magari appeared in my hallway. I had no idea how long she'd been here, nor how she gotten in. I noticed she had her heels on, though.
あなた。
I stood up, and Sachiko was, as always, waiting in the wings behind me.
幸せの石で帰ってこれたわ。鐘付き堂の階段から吹き抜けを落ちてる間にね。まあ天神症が壊れたからこの石は使えないけど。
To demonstrate, Magari snapped the two pieces together.
涅槃よ、死人を迎えよ。ほらね。
I probably flinched, but she was right. Nothing happened.
世界はもう数刻のうちに混沌に包まれて死の世界になる。あっけないでしょ。まさにこの世の終わりってやつ。ちなみにあれ私の教団アレンジでしょ。我ながら引くわ。
She pulled back her chin and flashed me a strained smile.
ああ、そういえばあなたの親もイカれて入信してたわよ。
This day couldn't have been much worse for me.
あなたこのままでいいわけ？
Magari wasn't mincing words, it seemed. I held my head in both hands and looked down at the ground.
責任を感じてるならちょっと顔貸しなさい。あんたの血に話がある。
Magari approached me and grabbed my arm. Sachiko, still right behind me, began to growl like a guard dog.
話してよ。どうせ私なんか友達も救えない。何もできない。篠崎の血だか知らないけど私にできることなんて何もないよ。大体涅槃をこの世に出したのはヨシエさんが最初にやったことじゃない。
I screamed as loudly and as fiercely as I could.
私悪くないじゃない。
I don't know how she can claim that she didn't do anything wrong. I closed my eyes and cried the hardest I've ever cried, sobbing so intensely that I found myself nearly hyperventilating. So, this is the mistake she made, right? She didn't trust Machinima? What's his name? I can't remember his name, dude. Machinima. The guy that keeps saving her from harm that she played with, right? She didn't trust him. She eventually went with someone she never met before that was in her room while she's dressing after her bath. To bring her friends back that she had no clue how to do. She listened to someone that was phoning her the whole time. The only person that could phone her with a weird number. He was missing the whole time. Didn't even help her do her deeds. Yeah. Like, that's all the mistakes she made, literally. There's like 10 of them, but I'm just thinking of a few. Magari slapped me down to the ground.
ほんとムカつく女ね。あなた等身大すぎるわ。少しは格好つけようとなさいよ。
I held my cheek and continued sobbing. Magari was looking down on me with contempt in her eyes, but also a certain intensity that seemed more akin to desperation than anything.
篠崎あゆみ、真実を一つ教えるわ。7番目の柱。知識のセフィラの軌道を止められなかった時点で、もう世界の終わりは動かない。だけど。
Goodness. I would just kiss her, dude. Magari closed in on me, as if the lips were about to touch. Sachiko growled again, but Magari was clearly not intimidated in the slightest.
ブック・オブ・シャドウズはまだ失われていない。あの本を手にした篠崎の血を引くあなたならミストとまだ戦えるかもしれないわ。
I was still hesitating, and Magari apparently didn't much like that.
ふざけやがって。
Suddenly, Magari was pulled up the top of my uniform. My plump, white stomach was now fully exposed.
クソったれの本はここにあるわ。
She pointed at the spot below my belly button. She did what? As she did so, my stomach started growling and an unheartly roar and shifted in place slightly. It was almost like there was a snake slithering around inside me.
まったく、もっと早く気づけばよかったわ。篠崎義恵の家の地下で力を使ってから、そこに潜り込んで眠ってやがったのよ、そいつは。
Magari crossed her arms and snorted.
ただし、あくまで入れ物で、中身は空っぽだけどね。生意気にうなってやんの。
The growl came from within my own body, sounded like that of a wild beast.
まさか、本当に？ほんと、すっかり騙されたわ。私は本来、教団からあなたがあの空間で、ブック・オブ・シャドウズを手に入れるためのサポート役。それと、その他雑用のために派遣されていたのよ。そうなの？って言っても、手に入れた瞬間、奪い取るつもりだったけどね。まあ、それも、今となってはどうでもいいわ。世界が壊れるのなら、教団の継承権もクソもないし。ただね、ムカつくのよ。ミストよ。ミスト。あれで勝ったつもりでいるなんて、笑っちゃうわよね。そんなあいつを思いっきりなぶり殺してやりたいでしょ。あなたも甘ったれずにできることに目を向けなさい。可能性を放棄するのは死んだ後でいい。
My eyes began to well up yet again.
私にまだ何かできることがあるの？
Magari's expression turned deadly
なんと
serious.
してもブック・オブ・シャドウズを体の外に出して支配なさい。本があなたの覚悟を認めれば自然と出てくるわ。そして 本の力があれば、ミストのいる涅槃にもう一度乗り込む道も示されるでしょうよ。
Bye, have a great time. I could only stare incredulously. What? Incredulously, yeah. At the abdomen, Magari took this opportunity to open the front door. Again, illustrate her point. Outside, the weather was still completely anomalous, with hurricane-like winds and debris clouds everywhere. The clouds up above, too, were moving abnormally fast through a disconcerting blood-red sky. Every few seconds, a sound not unlike a spark plug firing could be heard echoing from the distance as another black flame ignited and burned itself out in some random spot.
どのみちあなたも世界と共に滅びて死ぬわ。だったら見せてみなさい。その前にあなたの覚悟を。黒魔術から生まれたその本は残酷と血を好むわ。
With those parting words, Magari disappeared into the city, the sound of her heels clacking softer and softer until they were no longer audible at all. Sachiko and I could do nothing but see her off. The entire nation was now plagued with entity walls and black, silhouette-like spurts of the dead. The entity walls were rapidly destroying schools, downtown bypasses, and other crucial traffic cornerstones, and even rescue shelters, creating countless new casualties by the minute. People were running in the streets, panicked and confused, and almost certainly not much longer for this earth. Meanwhile, in Miss Kuan's office, the black-suited agents watched in horror as the TV monitor displayed a feed from different news networks across the world, and the story was exactly the same on all of them. How is the book supposed to recognize my determination? What the hell am I supposed to do? Well, let's do it.
お姉ちゃん、私に力を貸して。
In front of the mirror dresser sat Hinoa's zodiac dagger. I gripped it in terror, closed my eyes, and started shaking.
なんとしても、ブックオブシャドウズを体の外に出して支配なさい。黒魔術から生まれたその本は残酷と血を好むわ。
I couldn't back down now. I lifted the dagger in front of me, poised to plunge it into my body and carve myself open, as a samurai once did, in a ritualistic suicide called seppuku. But I couldn't go through with it. I was too scared of death, too scared of the pain. The The face that reflected back at me in the mirror was twisted with fear. I didn't even recognize myself. But I could see in those eyes all the weight that had been put on my shoulders, all the responsibility I'd been forced to bear.
臆病で矮小で弱くてこんな自分さえいなければここで決別するのよ。
My mind made up. I lifted the dagger again, only to bring it halfway in a destination before halting. It descend once more. No matter how determined I was, no matter how strong my conviction, this was literally suicide. I knew what had to be done, but knowing and accepting are two different things. I began crying like a baby. This was the most afraid I've ever been in my entire life. And almost certain the most afraid I ever would be. At this point, the only way I'd be able to go through with it was to clear my mind and let my arms make the motions automatically. And before I knew it, that's exactly what I did. It's most likely because I wasn't thinking about it, or anything else, for that matter. The dagger found absolutely no resistance. It was like applying excess force to a slice of cake. For a very brief moment, I felt nothing, but then the convulsion started. First in my abdomen, and then quickly spreading up the rest of my body. My abdomen was now spasming and constricting involuntarily, and the rest of me wasn't faring much better. My entire body was in total chaos. The extent of the agony I'd felt for a moment was absolutely impossible to convey. It was all encompassing. I was utterly incapable of fusing on anything else. My lower body was spewing bright red, thick black blood, and an unknown yellow substance, which is most probably stomach acid, by the way. All of which were blending together into a slurry that was at its core my life essence. This went far beyond anything I could have imagined. The sheer shock of it rendered my mind a jumble that I simply could not untangle. I knew there was a reason I'd done this to myself, something I absolutely had to do, and it was crucial. But regaining enough cognitive function to do would be a challenge. My head was swimming as I tried, beyond all reasonable measures. The hang of the consciousness, just long enough to complete the task at hand. I could still see my face in the mirror, but only just, as the blood that had been spurling from my abdomen had largely gazed over. It was a truly frightful sight, comparable to, if not more disturbing than anything I'd seen in Heavenly Host. I felt feeble, helpless, and the face in the mirror was smiling at me for it, darkly, obscenely. Jet black crowds flew by outside the window, and in that moment, a fire sparked within me. Feeling oddly resolute, I gripped the dagger, jetting out of my abdomen. And yanked it to the side of every last bit of strength I had left in me. The spray of blood gushing out of me become almost exponentially more violent. Most surprisingly, it seems like equal amounts of blood were rushing to my brain as well. And the effect was a feeling like the blood vessel in my head were on the verge of bursting. But just as I felt like moments before the final blackout, I saw something there among my own entrails. On the ground was a blood-drenched tome. It was the Book of Shadows, without question. My vision blurred from intense loss of blood and even more intense pain. I fell forward, unable to maintain any semblance of balance any longer, and I landed right on it. With a loud, warm, and pleasant splash, my face planted firmly into the book, which was steaming under the odd temperature differentials of my viscera. I awoke with a start. I stole in Hinoa's room. Instinctively and frantically, I looked down at my abdomen. There I saw a scar resembling the ones I'd almost died from during the blowback at Yoshi's house. Runic lettering and all. But that was it. The bleeding had stopped. In fact, there was no blood anymore in the room, and on the floor in front of me sat a Book of Shadows. Not a copy, but the original. I slowly touched it, and from being me, Sachiko spoke. She was staring at me with a docile, almost reverent look in her eyes. I picked up the book and looked at it. Fear and awe running through my now clear head. It grumbled a bit, darting eyes back and forth. Eventually, it seemed to settle on a specific direction, looking its gaze. It seemed to be looking out the window. Like anyone I know would say mom first and then dad second, just by the way. Bye, have a great time.
きっと私帰ってくるからね。
Yo, put your shoes on, girl. What the heck? Leaving the room without your shoes, huh? It's weird that we're seeing credits here on copyright music. This is only chapter 7, dude. It's 10 chapters, according to my knowledge.
幸子、不思議な気持ちだけど、あなたがこうして味方でいてくれると心強いよ。
Sujiko looked at me with his sweet, innocent eyes. When I arrived at Kishigari Academy, I got much better look at the phenomenon. It was like a whirlpool with red, dully shining hole in its center. Was this the entrance to the ever after?
あの先に涅槃が。動的魔法？魔女みたいに空を飛ぶの？嘘だ。
I closed my eyes and clasped the Book of Shadows tightly in both hands and prayed.
Book of Shadows, 力を貸して。
When I opened my eyes again, I looked into the sky. My body began to float. I was in control of the Book of Shadows. I was legitimate practitioner of magic now. This moment felt almost like an awakening to endless new possibilities.
これ本当に飛んでる。すごい。
And right next to me, flying on my side, was Sachiko.
Ayumi.
For the moment I lost the focus and dropped me from my trance, I immediately began falling. I gripped to the book even tighter and concentrated harder than before. And sure enough, I began rising upward to Vortex once more.
あゆみ、気をつけて。あなたが力を使えるのはその本のおかげ。絶対離しちゃダメ。
わかったわ。
As I flew higher, I could see Margari sitting on top of the roof of the school.
ブックオブシャドウズを従えたようね。見直したわ、篠崎あゆみ。それにしても、如月学園の真上に涅槃へのエスカレーターがあるなんてね。ついでにもう一つ教えてやるとね、涅槃がこの世界に侵食してつながってしまったのは別にあなただけのせいじゃない。涅槃天神症がこの世に発生してしまった時点で、いいえ、もっと以前にブックオブシャドウズが生み出されてしまった時に、いつかこの時が来ることは決まっていた。
I looked into Magari's face. She was being completely sincere.
その本の元の所有者も篠崎義恵もみんなそれを食い止めようと、あるいは遅らせようと必死だったの。それが次世代へつなぐだけの運命であってもね。そうやって代々受け継いできたのよ。
そうだったの。
だから言ってみれば、あなたがいようといまいといずれこうなったわ。ただあなたの行為はあの狂信者集団野号浦教会の生き残りミストに涅槃のパワーを与えてしまった。その責任は取らなきゃいけないわ。
責任。
あなたには本物のブックオブシャドウズがある。天神症で分散していた涅槃の力はミストの持つ偽物に取り込まれてしまった。でもそれを取り戻してその本に封印すれば、あんなもの簡単に吹っ飛ばせるわ。そして涅槃のコアをも迎え入れられたなら、その本は完璧なものとなる。さあ反撃よ、食らわしてやりなさい。世界が終わる前に一発ぐらい本物の実力ってやつをね。私は見ているわ。
Magari grew smaller as I climbed higher and higher. And I looked up. I could see the threshold looming, even larger, poised as if warping itself around me.
あゆみ。怖い？死ぬの怖い？
怖いかな。
What do you know? Like, dude, everyone's scared of dying. I smiled at her, and to my surprise, it was a genuine smile. However, somehow or another, I was feeling very calm. Sachiko looked at me with wide eyes.
どうしたの？
She turned away briefly, then looked over at me once more. It was almost seemed like in total brief moment, as she changed expression in much the way someone would change a suit.
あゆみ。怖いのはサチと涅槃のコアにいる人。気をつけて。
涅槃のコアにいる人？それはミストじゃなくて？
うん、別にいる。
I looked back up and find myself practically right on top of the hole in the sky that stood in front of the abnormally huge red moon. And with my convictions settled, I jumped in. Sorry, I just got flashbanged by the freaking screen, dude. My harsh flash, thank you. The nausea and the wrench tightness in my chest caused me to lose consciousness for a second. But then I woke to find that that heaven on earth had switched places. It looked as though I were falling ahead first into a massive storm with flashing lightning and roaring thunder. It almost seemed like I was previewing what the world would look like after its destruction. In the sky, there was an enormous face of a doll, and the walls around me were all made of flesh. I clenched the Book of Shadows with both hands and slowly made my landing in the new version of Nirvana. It was a mountain of rubble.
何これ、完全に壊れてる。いったー。何よもう。
あゆみ、大丈夫？
平気だよ。これくらい。
I slowly, carefully found my footing and pulled myself back up to my feet. This was an entirely different heavenly host. It bore almost no resemblance whatsoever to any version of the school we traversed previously.
天神小学校がこんな姿に。みんなは。町田くん、中島さん、岸沼くん、クオン先生、愛子さん。
I called out my friends, but received no answer. All I could hear was the rubble and twisting of air around me. I took 2 steps upwards and then, there was no mistaking it. In the midst of the wreckage, pieces of floating from all of them, I'm just going to say that, were clearly visible. And the unfortunate souls who were wearing this clothing were all buried under fallen beams and other debris and surrounded by a veritable sea of blood. I knelt down and began sobbing uncontrollably. Sachiko stared at me as I continued to scream and cry.
幸子頑張ってみる。天神小学校の運命だったらちょっとなら戻せるかもしれない。
Sachiko produced a cavalry necklace from her pocket. A skeletal figure on the chain made a slight hollow clicking sound as it was handled, very much as actual bone would. It looked handmade and seemed oddly warm, like a keepsake. Well, it's warm because in her pocket. No, she's a ghost. She can't be warm. Yeah. I had this weird feeling that I'd seen this object somewhere before. Though she was looking down at the ground a bit, slightly guilty and slightly guarded, Sachiko giggled slightly.
これ、幸子の宝物。
A big smile crept across her lips, and for a moment she looked every bit a part of the ordinary little girl. I was confused. Sachiko placed her hand on the Book of Shadows,
ファクトループ
and the book spoke.
同じ日を繰り返せ。
Followed by Sachiko. Suddenly, I was in Yoshi's clinic. The very same clinic Nakashima and I had visited on the fateful day.
この人はヨシエさん。
I was viewing Sachiko's memory of the event long ago. Yoshi was writing something in her
ア
journal.
ナグラムの解析を進めると、この本に書かれている術はすべて実体の伴わない理論でしかなかった。成功例に関する文献も全く存在しない。私はなんと愚かなことをしてしまったのだろう。最初から成功しないものに心血を注いでいたなんて。本の中身である涅槃が飛び出し、異空間を作ってしまうだけの失敗作の術。しかもそこに囚われた死者は生きていた証、存在の痕跡すらも消されてしまう。
Sachiko came into the room from the back. Her eyes met with Yoshi, and she smiled.
だが、飛び出した涅槃を抑え込むことができたため、
Sachiko stood obediently by her mother, wearing the white dress she'd seen her in Heavenly Host. Yoshi patted her on the head approvingly. Sachiko then coughed out a fine black mist, but sucked it back into her mouth like a carp.
失われ、黒く消えたあの人の存在だけは取り戻せたのだ。
The face of an image was blacked out, like those of Seiko and the others. However, to my surprise, the black marking was slowly peeling itself away, revealing the features underneath. My vision slowly cleared, and when it did, amidst all the rubble and shaking, I found myself back at the Heavenly Host Elementary.
これは
Then promptly, Seiko collapsed onto the ground. Without thinking, I picked her up and held her limb tight, body in my arms. She must have used up the spirit energy, as she was clearly drained. She was breathing out only very slightly.
苦しそう。私、幸子に触れてる。
Sachiko was real. She had to have been, or I wouldn't have been able to hold her like this. She seemed injured, but not in any traditional manner. There were cracks running through her body, each one emitting an underly blue, almost Jesus light. Meanwhile, the skull itself was also cracking, breaking all around me, making an incredible noise. The roof above began to rubble or crumble away, providing glimpses of the real world. And incredibly, the entity walls hadn't sprawled there yet.
戻ってる。まだみんなが死ぬ前だわ。幸子、しっかりして。
あゆみ、ごめん。すちこ。あんまり時間戻せなかった。 Satsuko, arigatou. Erai ne. Ganbatta ne.
I could hardly believe it. I just complimented Sachiko, of all people, on a job well done.
褒めてくれるの?
Her newly formed physical body was rapidly beginning to evaporate into mist. My voice was trembling, though I suspect it was less with fear and more with confusion.
すごいわ。あなたはいい子よ。
As she looked up into the sky, eyes beginning to well with tears, as she was struggling to speak. Soon, she wouldn't be able to at all. How does one person cry this much? Your eyes would be so dry after the first 2 chapters. We're in chapter 7 now. She cried in every chapter like 4 times.
幸子、謝りたかった。
She barely had any voice left, but was preserving nonetheless. This was clearly something she didn't want to leave unsaid, no matter what.
許してもらえないのは分かってる。けど、謝りたかった。
And with that, she began full-on crying.
幸子。
I couldn't help doing the same.
たくさんの人殺しちゃった。幸子、いい子じゃない。褒められちゃいけない子。
The tears were streaming down my face now. Sachiko's voice was mournful, so genuine.
けれどあなたは今たくさんの人を救ったわ。ありがとう。
A massive earthquake shook the ground. Sachiko looked scared, so I patted her head and hugged her tightly. She then looked me Coralie in the eye, gripping her cavalry necklace tightly in her hand, as if it were a rosary.
不思議だよ。正しいって分かったら成仏するの怖くない？あ、幸子。
Sachiko had a blue light, like both disappeared completely. She was gone. The being I was hugged moments ago no longer existed. All I could do was clench my fist and mourn. The look on Sachiko's face when I asked if I was scared of dying kept flashing through my head.
幸子。あなたも怖かったのね。
I kept my head hung low for a moment and then stood up, wiped my tears from my eyes. Accompanying the sound of rubble, one single entity wall now stood in the real world. The cycle was beginning anew.
見守っていて、幸子。篠崎の末裔の私を。
I told you guys this before. I literally called it out in the previous episode. We're gonna rewind time somehow.
いいよ。いい。最後。
It's game over, man. To be continued in chapter 8. Well, let me know what you guys think about this chapter, man. Lots of reading, lots of dialogue. Literally 1 hour of reading and literally a minute of playing, if it was that many times. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this episode. If you did, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new. And I'll catch you beautiful people in the very next video. Love you, take care, and as always, remember to twist some nips. Peace!